joining us today. We have a very packed schedule, so you'll be relieved that I'm going to give only a very, very small introduction, just the background to ourselves. We have other webinars if those are interested in a more broad introduction to business, to Group VC. I have been involved, as indeed have all my colleagues, in trying to move us all forward, move the industry forward from this world of unmanaged, unstructured, difficult to extract information into this trusted, structured, fully audited world of information. Really, since I first got engaged in that, as Alison said, over 20 years ago, and it's been a passion to try and support our customers in their journeys to be able to benefit from that. Just in regards to who our customers are, I'm sure there will be some names that are familiar to you there, and as you can see, they range in particular from not just across a number of industries within the sector, but also we're very, very privileged to have what another of my colleagues would call a 360-degree view of the world, in that we work both for those who are delivering assets to clients and owner-operators, and also are very, very proud to have some of those owner-operators in those spaces, particularly in the spaces of water and retail, as our customers as well. And what that really gives us is an insight across the full life cycle of the needs of collaboration, information management, and ultimately moving towards this panacea of digital transformation. So today we're going to talk very specifically about the importance of location, the power of location. And I'm going to just set the scene here really with pinning this back to what we're all trying to do. And it's ultimately, there is a phrase which is start with the end in mind. And the end ultimately, in fact, it could be many places along the life cycle. And really it's about being able to answer questions, and answer questions based on readily available information that is structured in a way that I can immediately extract at the point of need information that's going to answer the questions I have. And these would be some typical questions that we might see within operations, such as if the air conditioning goes wrong, who you would be contacting, indeed if you need to bring ladders, and so on and so forth. And this has powered a journey of delivering this digital asset information. And by digital asset information, I think it's just worth pausing for a second what we mean here. And this is this hugely important combination of structured data, but in particular this combination of spatial data and documentation. So, and the spatial element of this really is the focus of today. But the other thing of coordinating together documentation and structured data in a spatial way is these things on the left-hand side. Because if I'm going to answer questions about that, then I need to know a few things. First and foremost, I need to know that it is current enough for answering the question that I have in mind. But secondly, it may be current, but it may be nonsense. I have to know from a provenance point of view that this has come from a trusted party. And this is why things like the auditability that comes from common data environments is so important. But even if you've got current trusted information, if it isn't easily usable, if it isn't available, and this will be a theme of today, to those people who need to use it, wherever they happen to be, then that's still not going to be something which is able to solve that problem. And I would like us also to remember that this isn't just about doing something really, really good as far as project delivery is concerned, having a fantastic record, but then that record slowly being left to go out of date, and some people would say we're information going to die. It has to be that it is able to be maintained, and all of the changes that happen to those physical asset can be kept up to date in some kind of digital record as well, so that ultimately I can answer those questions. So, we've been working for a long time towards that, and a lot of people, their view of that would be that, we'd be looking at a digital asset like this, and this is very kindly provided by Thames Water. It's a flood alleviation scheme, and the observant of you would see a little yellow dot in the middle, and that's a man there being highlighted within there. It's a person we can see on the left-hand side, and we can see we've got some digital information, which in this case is being used to answer whether or not there's enough spacing in there for that person. But actually, there's a whole load of questions that I simply cannot answer if all I do is look at the information that is being delivered through a project by the supply chain. And this is full of things such as whether or not that asset is at risk from flooding, if we need to contact the local authority, then for a given location there'll be different parties and so on, and a whole range of questions which are related to but not directly answered by that. And this is not something which just was of interest to us. This is something which is really at the heart of where we're being driven for by our customers. And if I just highlight our relationship here with Thames Water, they came to us really in a moment of serendipity with exactly the same problem, which was that they recognize that they have all of these decisions and questions that they have to answer based on delivering what is a very, very complex program of hundreds of projects at once, of network update and maintenance. And ultimately, this graph here, which is a very, very accepted standard graph, is all about the cost as you go through time in relation to risk. That risk, of course, based on the uncertainty of not knowing those answers to questions. And the risks we're talking about here, again, I would imagine familiar questions around the environment, whether or not there are, for example, protected sites of special scientific interest there, whether there might be any legal ramifications there, obviously anything to do with archaeological sites, potentially battlefields and other geographical information, all of which is relevant when delivering projects, and also, of course, when assessing sites in the first place at the early stage. And a lot of you, I'm sure, will already know that this data exists, but this data is in existence in a whole load of different places. And this was the challenge that we were presented by Thames and others, which was, how can we make sense of this? How can we deliver a common place for this? And obviously there's an option within anything when it comes to software, which is just to do nothing. If we do nothing, then we are in this place. We are in this place whereby you have a common data environment which is used to deliver projects and programs, which contains all of that rich information we've described. But you also have got this other information, this contextual information that sits in these different websites, and also notably in in-house systems, in GIS and ERP and so on. And when I do want to answer those questions, bringing all of that together and trying to make sense and know I've got the right information, that's time consuming. It causes delays rather than it being something I can get in seconds. It might take hours or even days to get, and ultimately that introduces risk. So that was decided that wasn't an option, but there were some key factors that needs to be addressed if we are going to be able to solve these problems in a way that will work. Users now, they're not just sat in their office in a desktop. They're behind tablets, they're behind mobile devices, and of course they are location independent. And so we need to be able to deliver, as I say, at the point of need. But there's also impatience there. It absolutely is, I need this answer now, and if I can't get this answer now, then I might decide to proceed, on a basis of what I do know. So we need to be able to substantially improve what's there. And in discussion with we agreed that this meant familiarity. If users can already get at this information embedded with what they've got, then that's going to break down one of those barriers. And the most familiar environment to them that was obvious here was their common data environment. Along with this, it's got to be a cost-effective solution, because of course they're already in a situation where there are licenses and so on that have been paid for, and it's got to be easy to access. See that thing about impatience and not wanting to go to lots and lots of different systems, and that whole notion of provenance, of current and reliable data, not getting simply snapshots of this information, but being able to go to where that information is most current. So you know, we wouldn't be having this this presentation today if the solution wasn't what you see here, which was bringing together the Thames Water Common Data Environment powered by BC, but also with this rich information, geospatial information, and this was actually already something which we were looking at as a research project with our partners at the Ordnance Survey and also Mark's Views company, PCSG, and by looking at what we're doing and what we were doing and bringing that together in a solution, we were able to deliver. And just to give you an idea, the answers out there, the kinds of information in geospatial data, how that complements what we already have there. And it isn't just therefore about being able to communicate out a need, capture the asset information that's delivered through the project. It's about being able to connect it to, in this case, other mapping information. My colleague Sanjeev will show into this in far more detail. But the other thing that became relevant was and recognized was, actually, it's great that we can do all this in 3D, but a lot of people, the majority of people, do not have a host of information-rich models, but still have these challenges. And so really, while we actually started in a space where we were looking at connecting models to geospatial information, we ended up saying, how can we deliver this to this two-dimensional 2D drawings, documentation, and so on, and bring a sense of place so that people can easily interrogate and understand not just where their projects and assets might be located, but how they sit within that context. And I think that started us on a very, very exciting journey, which we then brought to our other customers, and one of those customers really was enthused by this. And I'm not going to talk for him. I'm going to let him talk about the ideas he subsequently had and where we could take this next. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Trevor.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Technical Services Manager for Mackley. I'll tell you a little bit about Mackley so that you know some of the background of where we're coming from. We're generally a main contractor. We do occasionally do Tier 2, but most of the time we're a main contractor. We've got a framework with the Environment Agency, and 70% of our work is for the Environment Agency and similar customers. We specialise in flood defence and coastal maintenance and piling works. Primarily around the South Coast, but we work nationally and internationally. We were a family company up until 2014 when Van Noord, who are one of our joint venture partners on the EA framework, along with Kier and Royal Haskoning, purchased us. That was great because it's given us a bit more flexibility. It also gives us the support that we get from Rotterdam on some of the more technical projects that we start working on. The type of projects that we do, this is Molesey Weir at Hampton Court. We replaced in total 7 radial gates on the River Thames, new fish pass. As you can see, a lot of M&E work which we put out to our supply chain, a lot of electrical work, a lot of O&M manuals that come out of this, and a lot of information that we have to pass on to the client, but that we also need to make available to our site teams. This was a 2-year project split into 2 halves, and again, that information had to be transferred from year to year. Portsea Island, down near Portsmouth, more traditional earth embankment with some rock protection. A bit more unusual for us. We don't normally do buildings, which is why BIM is a bit more difficult for us to apply on most of our projects. In this case, we were doing the groundworks and the foundations for Ben Ainslie Racing. And we also got involved as main contractor for installing the staircase on London Bridge, primarily because of our health and safety knowledge. one of our very unusual projects was carrying out the civils works and acting as principal contractor on the I-360 in Brighton. What you see here is the foundation holding down bolts, and the whole of that void was filled with concrete. And that is basically what holds up the I-360 iconic tower in Brighton. So my background, I am not a BIM professional. I'm a civil engineer. I do BIM now. It's very much part-time in terms of my job. I'm a design manager for Mackley predominantly. Having said that, previously I've been a consultant. I've worked for the Environment Agency both as an asset manager and managing incident response across the Thames and Southern regions actually. And I've been with Mackley now for 11 years, again both as a site manager, actually constructing things on site and getting dirty, and now as design manager and technical services manager. So why did we go with a common data environment, and what are we trying to get out of it? We need BIM level 2 compliance. Most, or 70% of our work is now supposed to be BIM level 2 compliant, and we've got a lot of other clients that are pushing for BIM level 2. And they want to know more about BIM and how it's going to help them. We've had incidents on sites, like many of you have, I'm sure, where a single point of truth would have solved that happening. So if everybody on a project, if all the project support team are buying into the same amount of data or the same information, and it's always the latest version, obviously that gives you, control of your risks on site. And also we were looking for business continuity. We wanted our information up in the cloud, and we wanted it accessible remotely and not relying on our own servers in our office, which were obviously at risk. Has it been plain sailing? No, it hasn't. Primarily because we need to get everybody to buy in to using BIM, and that's been a problem across the industry, particularly where you're not working on architectural type projects. To try and get embedment with our own business, we've actually split our CDE into 3 areas, and we use it across the business. So as well as in projects, we also use it for our process management control and have a reference information area where we keep all of our procedures and process documents and all our forms, and our departments use it so that they keep their own data within BC. And that way we just make sure that all of our staff know how to use it and are familiar with it. So what's the big problem? Getting individuals and multiple organisations on a project to use a single common data environment. The whole point of BIM is that it's in one place. The problem is you've got lots of people involved, particularly in the NEC3 contracts we use, such as ECCPMs, ECC supervisors, the client side designers, principal designers. They've all got their own ideas, and email works, doesn't it? It's worked for years, like the fax machine did before that. The information needs to be easily accessible by everyone with a minimum amount of training and support. The real problem is people don't like asking for help, and if they're not sure about something, they'd rather avoid using it. The problem with BIM and the problem with the common data environment is as soon as someone starts avoiding its use, it doesn't become that single point of truth, and the whole thing starts to fall over. To get around that, you've got to make it intuitive, and you've got to make it so that it's simple for everybody to use, and for everybody to access information on all types of devices. So this is the project that I really wanted to talk about, or one of the projects, and this is how we came about using GIS to try and help us. And we came across the business collaborator form of GIS and the viewer by accident, really. This is 7.2 kilometres of flood defence works that we're doing in Shoreham. It's a project that's going to go probably over 3 years now. It's quite an expensive project in terms of the commitment from the Environment Agency. The real problem is the number of landowners that are involved and the number of stakeholders involved, and trying to manage access to every individual property, which are literally houses on a lot of these banks, and making sure you've got the right consents in place, you've issued the notice that you're coming in, and you've got the landowner agreements, was a logistical nightmare, which was passed on to us to try and manage. We decided that the best way to do that was graphically by producing a GIS model that would effectively produce a RAG status on which areas we were allowed to work in. The problem was we didn't want to start a reach and find that there was one person that we'd forgotten to get permissions from, and it would have stopped the whole reach. We started by using QGIS, which was a free GIS platform. It was quite powerful. We got our colleagues in Rotterdam involved. We set the system up so it could produce RAG statuses. The problem was it wasn't accessible to everybody. We had a lot of information in there, but it just wasn't taken on board on the project and turned into something that people were prepared to use. And by default, people went back to managing it in spreadsheets because that's what they were comfortable with. By accident, while we were carrying out that work in QGIS, we discovered that we could access documents within our common data environment by saving hyperlinks to save searches. And we could put those hyperlinks within a Google Earth environment. So this is a screenshot of what we were using with Google Earth. The areas marked in there are the areas of interest and the drawing areas for the project. And by clicking on one of those areas, the KML file would open up a dialog box. That would take you to a hyperlink that took you into Business Collaborator. It worked great. You could use it on your phone, on your tablet. The only problem was it was a little bit clunky. You kept having to log in and log out. Putting those files into Google Earth was something that the individual had to do on their own platform or their own piece of computer hardware or laptop or phone and so on. So again, we didn't really get the buy-in that we wanted. We had a few discussions with a Business Collaborator how we could tie things up, and that's when we discovered that they were already working on the GIS viewer with some of their other customers, and we sort of imposed our will on them a little bit. So I'll just, rather than show you what our system will actually do, I just want to show you how quick it is to set up. The problem that we've still got is that when we go onto a project, so we talk to our estimators, the reaction I get is, yeah, it looks great, but it takes a lot to set up. It's not worth doing it on this project. So what I want to demonstrate here is just how easy it is to set up a hyperlink. Within any search within Business Collaborator, you can filter, you can search for things within each of the metadata fields, and you can select what items you want to appear. So in this case, we're in the published area, which means we're only going to pull up documents that have been published and have passed that verification stage. We're looking at reach W6, so we're only going to look at one of the 10 reaches that are on the system. And we can add information into any other of those. So we could put a status, we could put who it was originated by. If we were looking for temporary works, and we've done that temporary works design in-house in this case, if we did the originator as a drawing from TVO, that would return all of our temporary work. So you need to think a little bit about what you want your search to actually produce. So having gone through this process, we select what we want and we save it. We save it into Business Collaborator and we publish it. And from that, we can create a link to that search. Now, the important thing is here, this isn't a link to a document, this is a link to a search, which means if people add new documents that get picked up by that search, it will bring those documents in automatically. If people revise documents, it will bring in the latest revision of those documents. So you're always getting up-to-date information, and you only have to save this link and set this up in the mapping tool once. So we were then going back to Google Earth, and we still are. We save that hyperlink within the Google Earth tool, and we put it on a pin, on a trapezoid, on a line, on any shape that we want, any icon basically. We save that KML file, which is what Google Earth works in, into Business Collaborator, and as long as we put it anywhere within the project that we want it to appear, Business Collaborator will find it automatically. By clicking on the map icon in the top right-hand side, where it normally says listings, we can go straight into the mapping tool in Business Collaborator, and Business Collaborator has found our W6 drawings, it's put the layer in there. By ticking on it, we bring up the pins. We can then click on a pin, and it will take us to a dialog box, which then opens up the hyperlink, which takes us straight into the search. The advantage of this is we can set several of these mapping tools up. They appear in layers the same as they would do in Google Earth, which people are used to using. You can turn those layers on and off. In this case, we've got local authority boundaries, EA, flood data and SSI information, which has been imported automatically for us by Business Collaborator and is kept up to date by their own teams. And we want to take this a stage further. So at the end of the day, we need to hand this information over to the client as an O&M manual and as a health and safety file. And we're quite excited with PAS 1192 Part 6 coming out, that we can graphically show health and safety information on a mapping tool, accessible from phones and from any other device, be it Mac or PC. And you can either pull up the O&M manual, in this case the I, which that hyperlink will take you to information about the floodgate, what it's operating, limits hour operation and maintenance manuals. The icon in this case will take you, the exclamation mark, the hazard icon, will take you to information on a confined space entry chamber there, and a manhole that has to be opened in a particular way. So where we've got elevated risks, we can show these on a document, and this information is accessible to our teams, all our supply chain, and to the client, and we can pass this information through at the end, including the graphic tool. The nice thing with Business Collaborator is in creating that search and getting the hyperlink to the search, it also produces a QR code. That QR code can be printed, put out onto a site, and so even if the guy hasn't got his phone handy or can't be bothered to search, if he goes to that manhole chamber, there's a QR code, he clicks on that, it will give him the risk assessments, method statements, and everything else he needs to do the work, or in the maintenance period, highlight what hazards are there that he may not be aware of. And that gives us direct access straight from site. All of that works fine as long as the information that's been uploaded is in the right format, is set out in the right way, and has the right metadata. And we're delighted that Business Collaborator in their latest version have introduced placeholders. This lets us set up a series of effectively blank documents, and our supply chain just have to search for what it is they're trying to produce. So in this case, temporary works designer, he goes in, we can put a description in there for cofferdam, and it could be on a certain site, it could be a plan, elevation, or whatever. He does a quick search, finds the placeholder that he's looking for, and then all he has to do is upload his document into that placeholder. It doesn't matter what he's called his document, the document name is changed, the metadata is added automatically, and we then know that his information will appear in those searches, and that the information he's uploaded is then BIM 1192 compliant, and we can pass it through to the client CDE at the end of the project, knowing that we're not relying on our supply chain being experts in BIM. Which, to be fair, they're certainly not. Right, I'm going to take the risk of going live now. So this is the home page in our own common data environment. And what I want to illustrate here is one of the projects that we're working on at the moment. A lot of our sites have multiple locations, or they're along a length of shoreline, along a beach. And they aren't individual locations where we can rely on using a 3D model. In fact, very often we don't have a 3D model to work with unless we've actually started doing some survey work and setting out work ourselves. So in this case, the River Way project has got 7 locations. As I say, this is our common data environment, so we've got work in progress, shared and published, communications and photos. If I go up to the right-hand side, as well as the listing, we can go into the map area. And that goes and looks for any KML files we've set within the Riverway weirs, and here we are. We've got the one that we've set up for the locations. The project's quite new at the moment and isn't really up and running yet. And if I click on Ham Oils, because that's the area that I'm interested in, it takes me straight into the pin for Ham Oils. I could click on the pin, but because I know which site I want to go to, it's actually already opened up the dialog box. And what we've got here is a number of hyperlinks, each with their own title. So if I stay away so I don't keep clicking the thing up. So the top one is site-specific drawings. On these particular sites, there's a series of weirs down the Riverway, and on each site, there are some drawings that are specific to that location. There are a number of drawings that are generic and apply to all of those locations. Problem is with using a normal search function, if you're looking for all the drawings at Ham Oil, you won't find the generic ones unless you put those generic ones in every location. As soon as you start creating multiple drawings of the same drawing, or multiple locations of the same drawing, you've got the problem of you've lost your version control. By using this method, we've got the site-specific drawings with a hyperlink, and we've then got the general drawings, but they still appear under Ham Oils. If we went to Broadmead Weir, I'd get the same set of general drawings. I also get a site-specific map, and I get a site access map. And all our teams have to do is basically click on site-specific drawings, and it gives me a list of all the drawings relevant to that site, which then I can then filter into these various areas by who's created it, by the description, or whichever way I want to do it. To get back to the home page, I just click on BC, and I'll show you our Shoreham project. So this is the one I talked about earlier, which is where we actually developed the system. And again, with standard layout, we've got WIP shared and published. We've also keep our tender information in there as a baseline, and we've got communications and photos. If I go into the mapping on this particular project, it's 7.2 kilometres of piling and groundworks. So there are an awful lot of boreholes. If I click on the boreholes and I list the boreholes, you can see there are 1 or 2 boreholes there. Finding which one you actually want to look at, which one's relevant, and which is the one that you need to use isn't always easy. If I, for instance, want to know where this borehole is, it takes me straight into the mapping and it takes me to that borehole. If that isn't the right one for where I want to work, and I'm actually working the other side of the railway, and I click here, it will just transfer across, and I've then got the link to the log, and I've got the link to the main report. The main report's about 300 pages long, and most people want to read it. If you're an engineer and you're looking for something specific, you may want to open it, and you can get there. Most of the guys on site, the site engineers and our piling guys, they can do this on their phone just as easily as they can do it on a laptop. They can get straight into the log, and they can get that information to find out why their piles suddenly stop going in the ground or what may be an issue.
So I'm going to be talking about geolocating, geolinking, georeferencing, digital twins and digital estates. I'll describe in a minute what I mean by digital twins and digital estates. Just a little bit of background. Those of you that know BC will know, and we ran some stats a few weeks ago, we have something in the region of 15,000 to 20,000 different organisations that use the platform on a daily basis. As you would have seen from Trevor's presentation, a lot of the information that gets transacted is in the form of documents, drawings, photographs, and so on. What we are getting is an increasing number of people that are using BIM, are creating 3D models, and are wanting to get all the benefits that BIM has purported to offer, both in terms of the design process, the build process, but now also increasingly when the model gets handed over, or when the digital twin gets handed over, and in particular the benefits that are there on offer during operations and maintenance. And as well as being able to create digital twins, we're able to provide even more benefits by geolocating those models and linking them to related information. And that's fundamentally what I'm going to be talking about in the next few minutes. Okay, so I promised to describe what I mean by digital twins. So a very simple way of thinking of it, and in this example it is a house, but it could be a plant, it could be a road, it could be a bridge, and in many cases indeed it is. So a simple way one of our clients, Wienerberger, explains to their customers is, imagine you're going to buy a brand new house. As well as getting the keys to that house, you'll also receive a username and password to a digital representation of that house. You'll be able to walk through it, to walk into the bedroom or the kitchen, and as you're looking around the kitchen, you may see a dishwasher. You click on the dishwasher, and it'll give you all the related information, which might be its make, its model number, its serial number, instant access to the manual, when it's next due a service, and also what we're now doing is connecting to performance and sensor information as well. So that's fundamentally the sort of benefits you can get from a digital twin. So as well as sensor information, there's also the ability to perhaps control some of the controls that are available in the particular house as well. Just going to forward on a little bit. So I'm going to start the journey with how does somebody go about selecting a suitable place for their model and what they want to build. So we've seen from Steve's presentations and Trevor's presentation that there's a lot of externally available geodata sets that are openly available that we can connect to automatically. And we can either connect to that live, so if there are data sets that change frequently, as and when we connect to it, it will change. And here's some examples of Thames Water, so you can see a lot of their projects that they're involved in. We've selected the local boundaries. You can see what projects are involved in a particular local boundary. We can zoom into a significant amount of detail, and if there are listed buildings near where we're looking to build, you'll see that. We can search for places using Ordnance Survey Address-Based Plus to search, and we can even do things like potentially select a region of properties and instantly get back the location, the actual addresses of those properties. So here we go. It's highlighted all the properties and push that into a spreadsheet, which you may then want to run a mail merge and send letters to various local people that live there. So this is a real project. So we had our client Wienerberger that did just this. They wanted to understand if they were building near a floodplain, but also they then wanted to get more detailed information. So they're able to get what they could get from the system, but they then commissioned surveyors to go on site and load in point clouds, which you'll see in a little bit. Before they did that, they wanted to know, what their models would look like in the real location. So generally, when you're looking at a model, it's floating around in space. But imagine you could open up your model. The system automatically knows where in the world that model exists. It loads the model. It then loads the surrounding mapping tiles for that model, and then also, because it knows the heights of the surrounding buildings, can automatically do extrusions on those footprints, and all of a sudden you can see what is normally your model in splendid isolation, as some would call it, all of a sudden in its real world context. So here we go, we've loaded the local maps for that region. We know the heights of the various buildings that surround it. And by selecting the height option, it will do extrusions on that, and all of a sudden you can see your model in context of its surroundings. And of course, if we had the models of those surrounding buildings, we'd be able to load those as well. So once we've done that, and that's a lot you can do even before actually visiting the site, you can do a lot more subsequently by pulling in point clouds or LiDAR data or other survey information as well. We'll have a look at an example of that in a second. So this is a point cloud scan that's been done, and these aren't often very cheap, and sometimes you don't have a license to do the whole area. So it is a good idea to be able to federate that with the actual mapping information as well. Point cloud being loaded. We're going to now switch on the maps. You'll see the observant of you will see that there's a single model hidden somewhere in that area, and we can zoom into that area and do all the lovely things that you tend to want to do with a digitally rich model. So, and the features available in BC. So select a window, find all similar objects that are related to it, and if we wanted to search for an Apple map like you do, that's what it's done. What you would have seen as well, we've then swiveled around and had a look at what it looks like from the inside out of that building. So that's just looking at one model, and it's just one house, and not many of our clients just build one house, they build entire estates. So what they want to be able to do is query and find assets across an entire estate. So here's an example where we're loading what is 140 units made up of flats and various houses, and it will load all of those models into one view and collect all the data about every single one of those models, and we'll be able to query across all of them en masse. So we've done some great work in being able to load the models quickly. And what I should also point out is, everything you're seeing here that Steve's talked about, I'm speaking about, and Trevor's talked about, is all available through any web browser, any modern web browser, a mobile phone, or a tablet. So here we're going inside one of the homes. I could click on any of those objects and get more information about it. Fly through into the window there. Let's have a little look around, see what's there. There's a washing machine. And I've picked a washing machine because that's usually one of Steve's favourite things to talk about, because his one breaks quite a lot. So we'll select the washing machine, and we get all the information on the left-hand side about it. But imagine you're actually operating an entire set of houses or an entire estate, and actually that is one of those washing machines that actually does blow up and set fire. So you want to recall them. So you want to find where else those washing machines exist in your entire portfolio of properties. So here we can do a search, and you'll see those yellow highlighted washing machines through those particular homes. And here's another view of that. It's a really good way of really getting the most out of the models that you're now creating. And as I mentioned, we can connect to performance data. So had I had some performance information coming from that washing machine, I'd be able to click on an option in BC which says add IoT performance data. Don't have it for the washing machine, but here's an example of some sensors that I do have data for. So this is a bridge somewhere in London. I won't say exactly where it is, and you might be able to pick it out. But there's some work being done on it, and they want to understand whether there are any weaknesses. So they want to do a comparison of movement of the bridge with its temperature at any given time. So there's temperature sensors embedded in here. There are displacement sensors. We're able to connect them all to the bridge. And that's what we've just done there. And we're able to bring in the data, both live current data, but also historic data as well. So we can then time slice across the historic data set and carry out some analytics. So there we go, loading the data. We've got displacement is one of the charts, and temperature is the other one. And pick a moment in time that we're particularly interested in. So we can time slice it and say we want to focus on that particular date and period, that window there, and we can do the same for the displacement data below. Now, the way this works is you can connect that directly to sensor data, which offers its data through an API, or you can have a file loaded on BC, and it will connect to that file and pull the data from that. And there are also lots of freely available sensors that you may want to connect your digital twin to. I'm not going to be talking much about this, but this is just a little teaser of some fantastic work we're doing with Satellite Catapult, which you'll be able to hear more about at a forthcoming Think BIM event. So I don't want to steal the thunder there, but it's really would be worth having a look at the fantastic work we're doing there. Just a few acknowledgements there. So all of this wouldn't have been possible without the help from PCSG, Wienerberger, University of Cambridge, Department of Engineering, Ordnance Survey, and the Satellite Catapult. Okay, I'm just going to hand over to Steve, who's going to talk a little bit more on some fantastic innovation R&D that we're doing here at Group C.
So, as Sandra was saying, just for those of you who have been infused by that presentation, and indeed by Trevor's fantastic presentation before. I always love it when customers show what they've been able to achieve from the tools that we make available to them. That's what really makes all the hard efforts and bug fixing worth it. Then do come along, join us in Leeds on the 13th of June at Think BIM, where Trevor will be talking more about that, and as Sanj said, Sakti will be talking about all of that work around connecting satellite and sensor data. I'm going to talk just very briefly before we have our Q&A about where we might be going next with this, and obviously there's many possible futures. One thing's for sure, it's absolutely only the start. As was alluded to there's an enormous amount of data which is available, which we could connect to, literally thousands of data sets. I would encourage you all to look at Data.gov UK, a fantastic source opened up thanks to Freedom of Information and other initiatives. I think the most important thing is we really need to provide the right data to answer the right question. And the most important thing from our point of view is really recognizing the value that delivering this information to our customers has in helping them address questions that currently they are unable. And I would emphasize that all of this here is very much, we see it as complementary to all of the data which is already able to be produced by GIS teams and departments across the country. It's by no means a competitive situation. It's about actually being able to free up and enable and utilize that information so much more, so we can deliver it down to those people who want it. So, and I think there's also opportunities around bringing in, obviously from a license point of view, bringing in commercial data, specifically very sensitive data we've been asked to look at times, maybe even around things like where there might be unexploded ordnance and so on. But with that, of course, comes a need, absolutely in line with everything in BIM, for being able to deliver that information securely. And although we can lock that information down at the moment by our customers who are using it, really we want to be able to take that to the level of granularity of just those people working within a specific project. That's already the case with our KML information, but some of the shapefile information and other served geo data, really that should only be to those people who can see it. So we see that as the next obvious step. And with that as well, we know that our customers are enthused by this. We know also that they don't want this to be that every single time they have to do something new, that it means that we have to go away and write something, or we have to do some work to make it available. So moving more and more towards making this a self-service capability where anyone who has access to the shapefile information or GeoTIFF information or whatever can upload it to the CDE, and it just suddenly becomes available to those project teams, or indeed to people exploring assets. I think that really will be a catalyst for this. And in fact, one of the things that we're already progressing incredibly well, and that, again, Trevor came to us with, was how can we look at this not just from a point of view of the information static in time, but if we want to understand the progress of something, say, over the last 6-month period or something, this might be to do with, if we're looking at, in dredging, how much that's being washed away, if you will, by the sea, as it tends to come in and ruin that beautiful work, being able to look at how that propagates on a map. That's very, very possible with this technology. And I think the most important message to come out of this, because it's one of connection, is it's not how can we do things that can already be done in other tools and simply do those through the web. That's a great place to start. But of course, it's actually, given that we have this fantastic, rich, structured information in a CDE backed by audit and provenance and workflow and so on, how can we really get the value of connecting that to geolocated information? So at the simplest level, that's about extending things like being able to search for documents, but rather than return those documents within a listing, being able to see where they exist on a map. But better still, being able to, in fact, draw a space on a map and say, give me all of the documentation, perhaps all of the photographs relating to that sit within that CDE, that have gone through those processes that Trevor described. And even down to being able to flag up and see how many RFIs or change orders or whatever there might be associated with a particular location. All of this stuff, I imagine, will begin life within that 2D world, but there's also progression towards being able to deliver these things through standards in that 3D space as well. And all of this, actually, I would say, shouts out the importance of standards, and no less when it comes to this space of Internet of Things, which at the moment, if you do any research in here, you will see that there are emerging standards here, competing standards, just like we had with browsers and the web, and just like we have in our own space. And I think what this is evidence of is when we do get these standards working, like what is now nice, robust GIS standards in the 2D space, we can really enable some fantastic things. And as Sanj alluded to, there are already, I would highlight ThingSpeak, I think an extra S in there, which is amazingly a location that captures sensor data from literally houses spread globally around the world and all other types of connected hardware, where people simply want to publish that so that people can then look at that, analyze that, get value out of that. And there's also exciting tools produced by the likes of IBM, the Node-RED platform for connecting hardware and sensors, and how we can bring all of this into our asset information. And of course, the cloud services from the likes of Amazon using the MQTT standard. So really, we have too much for today's presentation, but hopefully you've got a real sense of where we might be able to be going with this world of CDEs and common data, and how it isn't just limited to that which we capture in the work that we do, but it's about how we unite it with everything. But the upcoming webinars that we have in a couple of weeks around digital transformation, which I'm sure again might well touch on some of these topics, presented by Paul Shilcock. And then I myself, along with colleagues, will be getting down at the roots and in fact talking around these challenges of design management, document control, and how, as Trevor was alluding to, really the value that you've seen today comes from being able to work in this structured, controlled, managed world. So how can we ensure that all those processes are in place, but that they aren't a hindrance to ultimately the work that needs to be delivered? So thank you for that. I think we don't have a Q&A slide, but we certainly have time, I think, for sort of a handful of questions. Do we have, Alison, some questions?
Yeah. Okay, so very long question. So it starts, vendor lock-in is a significant concern for asset owners, particularly as systems like BC become more advanced. This lock-in occurs as the data level and occurs at the data level and at the data relationship level. How does BC store rules as queries? And then it goes on, are they available for export to clients in a standardized format? And then, please excuse my ignorance, e.g. OWL and SparkQL. And can clients plug other applications into the BC database?
Okay, so I'll answer part of that question, Steve, and then you might join in at the end. So I think one thing we should make clear is BC provides to each of its clients their very own instance of the CDE. It's theirs. So Trevor's and Mackley CDE belongs to them. They've got full control of who has access to the system, what information goes in, and have permanent access to that audit trail. So a lot of our clients have the same. So client operators have the same. So if we look at Highways England, for example, they've got their own client-side CDE, and we have a number of other BC clients that use BC, but they use their own instance. So Balfour Beatty have got their own instance of BC, so they'll get all the work they're doing for Highways England ready in their own instance of BC, so they've got permanent access to that going forward. And when they're ready to push that information and deliver that information to their client, Highways England, in this regard, they'll push that from BC to another instance of BC. So one sure way of a client being able to keep permanent access to all of their information, their digital twins and so on, is to have their own CDE. Steve, you may want to answer some of the technical aspects of that, please.
I think probably in particular focusing on the latter, we recognise that we are not the entirety of the solution. We already have implementations out there. I've spoken about them on previous webinars. Probably the most obvious one I would talk about would be Sainsbury's, where we are part of their digital estate, and through the interfaces that we provide, what is known as APIs, as you say, we connect to their other systems. So in that particular case, we connect at the sort of front end, we connect to their Salesforce system. We also connect to their Office environment, where single sign-on through the Microsoft Azure platform is achieved through that. And we also, in fact, connect to their specialist system that manages their specs and standards and links and brings all of that information together. It's also the case that we have other customers where we have linked to their specialist, for example, field platforms, where they already have a capability that they're comfortable with. They want to use that in conjunction with our software, and so we do not hold anyone, in this sort of locked-in world. We absolutely, part of our roadmap is we see ourselves as the custodians of information. We provide the controls, the means of communicating what's required, and ultimately the way of capturing and surfacing it at the point of need. But that point of need is not just users. That point of need is also systems. Hence, I referenced earlier in my Thames thing about maybe connecting to ERP. Obviously, you saw us connecting to sensors and so on. So we try as much as possible to promote open standards. A lot of the things you would have seen from Sanji were from around open BIM, and of course, when it comes to extracting and capturing information about assets, in fact, we pull that into a database specifically so that that can be connected to, but also so that that can be exported to in the event that someone did want to hand that information over. Interestingly enough, the reference to OWL, we also have a capability of alternatively storing that digital asset information in a linked semantic database. And as far as the rules are concerned, and any rules, a Sparkle that could be written against that would be able to query against that. Very much we found that's something which our customers who are looking towards the future see is a need, but really, I think when I look at us competitively in terms of the openness and the ability to be able to move forward with the information, I would say I think we stand in a very strong position.
All right. Well, thank you for that. We've run out of time. For the other questions that come in, we will come back to you directly with answers. There is a short questionnaire at the end of the seminar, and we would appreciate your feedback if you could spend 2 minutes just doing that. And we will send the webinar recording in about a week's time via email to you all. So again, thank you, Steve, Trevor and Sanj, and have a good day.